The hall of the alien king was filled with firelight, shadows dancing on walls carved with strange symbols. Rows of guards stood with their spears raised high, their armor made from black metal that seemed alive. At the center sat the king, his dark crown glowing faintly with blue flames. He was old, powerful, and cruel, his throne surrounded by piles of treasure gold coins. Shining jewels, weapons of forgotten wars, dot through the heavy gates of the hall walked a human. His boots echoed with each step. His body was scarred, his muscles carried years of battle, and his eyes were calm but unyielding. He had come from a world the aliens thought broken, a world of storms and endless struggle. He was not invited to bow, and he did not. Instead, he walked straight ahead, unafraid of the blades pointed at him. The guards shifted uneasily, their claws twitching. The king's voice thundered through the chamber. "Human, you fought my armies and still stand. You broke my beasts, burned my fleets, and turned warriors to dust. What do you seek? Speak, and I will reward you." The human said nothing at first. His gaze was not on the gold or the crown. His eyes moved across the room until they stopped at a figure chained near the throne. She was different from the others. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the firelight. Chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles, heavy and cruel. Her long hair, braided with small pieces of silver, hung down as she sat still, her head slightly lowered, but her eyes burning with quiet defiance. She looked both fierce and broken, like someone who had endured far too long. The king followed the human's gaze and laughed. "Ah, you look at her. She's been my prisoner for 2 centuries. A daughter of rebels. Her beauty fooled many, but her spirit could not be broken. She is nothing but a memory of a lost cause. You want treasure, human. Here." He waved his hand, and a chest of gold was pushed forward. Coins spilled onto the floor, rolling toward the human's boots, but the human did not look down. He raised his arm and pointed straight at the chained girl. His voice was steady, cutting through the chamber like steel. "Her." The hall fell silent. Guards looked at each other, unsure if they had heard correctly. The king leaned forward, his grin fading. "You refuse gold? You refuse power? You dare insult me by asking for her?" His voice grew darker, echoing against the stone. "She has been locked away for 200 years. Do you even know who she is?" The human's eyes never left the girl. "I know enough." The girl lifted her head, meeting his gaze. For the first time in many years, her eyes softened. In them was confusion, but also something else, hope, fragile and dangerous. She had long believed no one would come for her, that her story had already ended in chains. Yet here stood a human fearless before the king of her people, choosing her over mountains of gold. The king's hand tightened on the armrest of his throne. "You think you can take her, human? Do you know the price?" His laughter returned, cruel and heavy. "Very well. If she is what you want, then she will be yours. But only if you survive what comes next." He gestured, and the guards raised their weapons. The girl's breath quickened as the sound of metal echoed. She wanted to speak, to warn the human, but her voice caught in her throat. The human, however, stood calm, his hand now resting on the hilt of his weapon. He had fought wars, crushed beasts, and seen the worst the galaxy could throw at him. Gold meant nothing. Power meant nothing. But the sight of a chained soul, held captive for centuries, was something he could not walk away from. The king rose slowly from his throne, his massive form towering over the hall. Shadows wrapped around him like living creatures. "Then let it begin," he declared, his voice shaking the chamber. "Let us see if the human's choice will be his salvation or his doom." The human took one last look at the girl, his eyes steady, promising something she had long forgotten: freedom. The guards charged. The guards rushed forward like a wave of iron and claws. their armored feet shaking the stone floor. Spears glowed. With alien energy, crackling blue fire running along their edges, the human did not flinch. He pulled his weapon free, a blade scarred and old, forged not from alien metals but from human steel, dented yet strong. The first guard struck, his spear aiming for the human's chest. With a sharp twist, the human stepped aside, catching the shaft and pulling the alien close. His blade cut across in one clean motion, dropping the guard before the others had time to blink. Gasps filled the chamber. The king leaned back into his throne, his eyes burning with interest. "Yes," he said softly, his voice carrying even through the chaos. "Show me why they fear you, human." The chained girl watched in silence, her breath caught. She had seen many warriors fall before these guards, men and women stronger than her people could ever imagine. None had lasted more than a few moments, but this human fought differently. He moved not with wild rage, but with controlled precision. As if every strike had been planned before the battle began, 2 more guards lunged at once. The human ducked low, sweeping his blade across their legs. The sound of armor crashing to the floor echoed, followed by silence as he stood tall again, blood dripping from his steel. The others hesitated, fear creeping into their glowing eyes. Chains rattled as the girl shifted, her eyes wide. She whispered under her breath, words no one else could hear. Why for me?" The human's eyes flicked toward her, only for a heartbeat, but that heartbeat was enough. A spear scraped across his arm, tearing flesh. Blood ran down, but his grip on the blade only tightened. He struck back, faster and harder, the sound of steel against alien metal sparking across the hall. Soon, the floor was stained with both colors of blood, red from the human, green from the guards. Bodies lay broken, their weapons scattered like fallen branches. Only one guard remained, larger than the rest, his armor blacker, his weapon heavy with strange energy. He stepped forward, growling in a tongue the human did not understand. The human raised his blade again, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. This was no ordinary fighter. This was a commander. Their weapons clashed in a storm of sparks, ringing loud in the high ceiling. Each strike shook the air. The human's strength matched the alien size, his will driving him where others would break at last. The commander raised his weapon high, leaving his chest unguarded. The human stepped inside the strike, pushing his shoulder into the alien's chest and driving his steel blade through the armor. The commander fell, his weapon clattering across the floor with a ringing echo. Silence followed. The hall smelled of smoke and iron. The human stood with his blade dripping, his eyes fixed on the king. The king rose slowly, clapping once, twice, each sound deep and mocking. "Impressive," he said, his voice rolling through the chamber. "You kill my guards, break my commander, and still stand tall. But do you think this makes you worthy of her?" He pointed toward the girl. Her chains clinked as she looked up, her chest rising with each breath. Her eyes locked on the human again, filled now not only with hope, but with fear, for she knew the king's games never ended with one trial. The human's voice was rough but steady. "You offered gold. I refused. You sent warriors. They fell. What else will you throw before me, king?" The king's smile spread, dark and cruel. "Oh, human, you misunderstand. This was not the price. This was only the beginning." He waved his hand, and the ground beneath the throne began to shift. Stones moved aside, revealing a pit that glowed with fire. A roar came from the depths, low and thunderous, shaking the chamber walls. The chained girl's eyes widened. She knew the sound. Legends whispered of the beast kept below the throne, a monster born from shadow and fire, used only when the king wished to test the bravest souls. None had faced it and lived. The king's voice grew louder, echoing across the hall. "You want her? Then survive my beast. Prove your strength not against men, but against what even gods fear." Chains rattled again as the girl struggled, her voice finally breaking free. "Don't. No one survives it. Leave, human. You will die for nothing." But the human did not move. His blade rested against his shoulder, his eyes on the pit. Firelight painted his scars, and for a brief moment, he looked less like a man and more like something eternal. He turned his head toward the girl, his voice calm despite the growing roar. "I did not come this far to leave you in chains." The pit exploded with flames, and from it, the beast began to rise. The pit flared like a second sun, fire and smoke pouring into the throne hall. The heat pressed against every wall, forcing even the armored guards to step back. From the depths came a claw, black and jagged, larger than any sword. It gripped the edge of the stone floor, cracking it under the weight. Then another claw followed, and a monstrous shape began to rise. The chained girl's breath caught in her chest. She knew the old stories told to frighten children of a beast forged from shadow, fire, and rage. Now she saw that the stories had not been cruel enough. The creature towered as it pulled itself free, its body covered in molten scales that shifted between black and glowing red. Its head bore horns twisted like roots of a dead tree, and its eyes burned with endless hunger. Each breath spilled fire, filling the air with ash. The human stood his ground. He did not back away, even as the stones beneath his feet trembled. His blade, scarred and plain, looked pitiful against the beast's size. Yet his grip was firm, his shoulders steady. The king's voice thundered with amusement, "This is the trial of kings. You want her? Then defeat the beast that has ended all who dared challenge me." He leaned forward on his throne, his dark crown glowing faintly, his grin wide. The beast roared, the sound shaking. Dust from the ceiling. The chained girl turned her head away, her chains rattling as she whispered through clenched teeth. "No one can stand against it. No one. Not even him." Yet her eyes betrayed her words. She wanted to believe otherwise. The beast struck first, faster than its size should allow. A claw slashed toward the human, tearing through air with enough force to break stone. But the human rolled aside, the claw smashing into the floor where he had stood. Dust and rock exploded around him. Rising quickly, he ran forward, his blade flashing as he slashed across the beast's arm. Sparks flew, but the scales were too thick. The blade left only a shallow mark. The beast roared in anger, turning on him with its burning eyes. Its tail whipped through the hall, striking pillars and breaking them apart like dry sticks. The human ducked low, rolling under the massive sweep, and came up ready to strike again. The chained girl's heart pounded as she watched. Every move seemed impossible, every escape too narrow, yet the human endured. He fought not with strength, alone, but with patience, always moving, never letting the beast corner him. His blade struck again and again, not to kill yet, but to learn. The beast grew more furious with each missed strike. Flames poured from its mouth, washing over the hall. Guards fell back, shielding themselves, while the king only laughed from his throne. The human ran through the fire, his skin seared, his clothes burning at the edges, but his eyes never wavered. He drove his blade into the beast's leg, this time finding a joint between scales. The monster bellowed, stumbling for a moment. The girl gasped, her chains clinking as she pulled against them. He heard it," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. The beast recovered quickly, slamming its claws down. The human barely rolled clear, the impact sending him skidding across the floor. His arm bled where claws had grazed him, his breath heavy, but he pushed himself back to his feet. The king clapped once, slowly, his grin never fading. "Remarkable, human. You bleed, you burn, yet you rise again. Perhaps you truly are the monster they whisper of in the dark." The human ignored him. His eyes met the girl's instead. For a brief second, in the middle of fire and chaos, they locked gazes. She mouthed words without sound. "Don't stop." He nodded. The beast roared again, charging. Its claws smashed through piles of gold, sending coins flying like sparks. The human waited, his body still, until the last moment. Then he leapt aside, driving his blade deep into the beast's neck as it passed. Blood like molten fire burst out, scorching the floor. The beast howled, thrashing wildly, slamming into pillars, and breaking the throne hall apart. The girl cried out as stones rained down. She curled under her chains, shielding herself, but her eyes never left the human. He held onto the beast's neck, pulling his blade free, only to strike again. The monster slammed itself against a wall, trying to crush him, but he released his grip at the last second, rolling clear. His body was battered, bloodied, but he rose again. The beast turned, slower now, its movements less certain. One eye had gone dark, pierced by his steel. Still it lived, fire dripping from its jaws. The king's grin had faded to something colder, his fingers gripping the throne tightly. The human lifted his blade once more, his voice low but strong, carrying across the hall. "I did not come for treasure, I came for her. And nothing will stop me." The chained girl's eyes filled with something she had not felt in centuries. Faith. The beast roared and lunged again, its jaws opening wide to consume him whole. The human charged to meet it. The beast's jaws opened wide, fire burning deep in its throat. The human did not step back. Instead, he sprinted forward, his blade flashing in the firelight. At the last moment, he slid beneath the monster's head, avoiding its teeth by a breath. His blade drove upward into the softer flesh under its jaw. The strike cut deep, and the beast's roar shook the walls. Blood like burning lava rained down, scorching the stones where it fell. The human rolled free, his clothes torn, his arms blistered, but he did not stop. He rose again, gripping his blade tighter, his breath steady despite the smoke filling his lungs. The chained girl pulled against her bonds, her wrists bleeding. She cried out, her voice echoing across the hall. "Fight, human, do not fall now." The beast turned, enraged. One eye was gone, its jaw wounded, but its strength remained terrible. It slammed a claw across the hall, the force sending the human flying into a broken pillar. Dust filled the air. For a moment, the girl's heart froze. He lay still, his blade fallen from his hand. The king leaned forward, his grin returning. "And so ends your legend, human. Even your stubborn will cannot defy the beast." But before the king finished speaking, the human stirred. With blood dripping from his forehead, he rose slowly, one hand pressed against the shattered stone for balance. His other hand reached for his blade, lifting it once more. His body was broken, but his spirit was not. The beast charged again, flames spilling from its mouth. The human ran toward it, weaving between the fire, his steps unshaken. He leapt high, using a fallen block of stone to propel himself upward. His blade found the creature's throat, the place where scales were weakest. He drove the steel deep, all the way to the hilt. The beast thrashed, slamming against the walls, throwing the human aside. He hit the ground hard, pain tearing through his body. But the blade remained buried in the monster's throat. Fire sputtered in its mouth, choking. Its roar broke into a gurgle, then into silence. With one last shudder, the beast collapsed. Shaking the floor, the hall fell quiet. Smoke rose from the creature's body, its molten blood pooling around the stones. The human pushed himself up, staggering to his feet. His body trembled, but his eyes lifted toward the throne. The king no longer smiled. His fingers clenched the armrests, his voice cold. Impossible. No man should have stood against that beast. Yet you live. Tell me, human, what are you? The human's voice was hoarse but strong. I am no king, I am no beast. I am only a man who keeps his word." He turned then, his gaze falling upon the chained girl. She stared at him as if seeing light for the first time. For 200 years, she had been forgotten, locked away as a warning to others. And now one man had fought through gold, guards, and monsters, all for her. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Why me? Why would you risk death for me?" The human stepped forward, closer to her chains. His answer was simple: "Because no one should remain in chains." The king's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. "Do you think you can take her from me? You broke my guards, you slew my beast, but you stand in my hall still, and here I am the law." He rose from his throne, his massive frame towering over them. The crown glowed, shadows curling around him like living smoke. Girl flinched, pulling against her bonds, but the human did not move. He stood between her and the king, his back straight, his blade now gone, but his hands still clenched into fists. The king's steps shook the hall as he approached. "You dare defy me, human? Then face me. Face the king of shadows. If you want her freedom, you must take it with your own blood." The girl cried out, her voice breaking. "You cannot fight him. His power is beyond mortal men." But the human looked back at her, his eyes steady. "I did not come here to live forever. I came here to set you free." The king raised his hand, and the air darkened, shadows twisting into spears. His laughter boomed, filling the chamber. The final trial had begun. The girl's heart pounded, torn between fear and hope. She had seen kings and warriors fall before this power. But the human's presence, scarred and battered, was different. He was not chosen by gods or bound by crowns. He was only a man. Yet in his eyes burned something even kings could not command, the will to fight for another. The human spread his arms, ready to face the storm. "Then let it end here." The hall filled with darkness as the king unleashed his power. The throne hall grew darker as the king raised his hand. Shadows coiled around him like serpents, stretching across the floor and ceiling. The torches flickered and died one by one until the only light came from the beast's fading fire, and the faint glow of the crown on the king's head. The chained girl trembled. She had seen this power before, centuries ago, when the king crushed the last rebellion. Whole armies had vanished into that darkness. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "Human, run! No one can stand against him." But the human did not move. He stood tall, scarred and bloodied, his sword still lodged in the beast's throat. Empty-handed now, he clenched his fists, eyes steady on the king. "I am not leaving without her." The king's laughter rumbled, cold and deep. "Brave words for a dying man. You are flesh and bone, human. I am shadow and crown. Do you really think your will can break mine?" With a wave of his arm, the shadows surged forward, forming spears and claws that lashed out. The human dove aside, rolling across the floor, as a spear of blackness struck where he had stood, splitting the stone. He snatched a broken piece of a fallen guard's weapon, raising it like a short blade. It was crude, bent, and weak, but it was enough for his hands. The king raised both arms now, and the shadows swirled into a storm. Blades of darkness cut through the air, smashing pillars, slicing golden chests in half. The hall became a battlefield of black fire. The human weaved between the strikes, always one step from death. He used fallen stone to shield himself, rolling under one shadow strike to thrust the broken blade upward into another. The weapon shattered, but the shadows hissed as if burned. The girl's eyes widened. "He hurts the shadows," she whispered. Her hope grew. The king snarled, his grin gone. "No, you cannot touch my power." He lifted one hand, and the shadows coiled together into a single massive spear, blacker than night, sharp enough to pierce the stars. He hurled it across the hall, straight at the human dot. The human sprinted forward, his body screaming with pain, every wound burning. At the last heartbeat, he leapt aside, the spear grazing his side. Blood sprayed, but he kept running. With nothing. In his hands, he closed the distance to the throne itself. The king lifted his hand to strike again, but the human grabbed the edge of the fallen commander's weapon lying near the throne. With a roar, he slashed upward, steel against shadow. The strike ripped through the king's conjured claws, scattering the darkness like smoke. The girl cried out, her chains rattling. Yes, do not stop. The king's crown glowed brighter, the air trembling with its power. Fool, he roared. The crown binds me to the shadows. As long as it rests on my head, you cannot win. The human froze for only a moment, his chest rising with each heavy breath. His eyes flicked from the king to the chained girl, then back. Slowly, an idea formed. The king raised his arm for a killing strike. Shadows gathered, twisting into a storm of blades. But before he unleashed it, the human hurled the broken weapon. It spun through the air and struck the chains binding the girl. Sparks flew. The metal links cracked but did not break. The girl gasped, stunned. The king turned his head for a split second. That was all the human needed. He rushed forward, slamming his shoulder into the king with all his strength. Both crashed against the throne. The crown tilted, slipping from the king's head. The shadows faltered, flickering weakly. The girl screamed, pulling with every ounce of strength she had left. Her chains cracked again, one link snapping. She reached out, stretching her hand toward the human. The king roared in fury, clawing for the crown as it rolled across the floor. No, it is mine. The human dove after it, pain burning through every muscle. His fingers brushed the crown at the same moment as the king's. The throne hall trembled, cracks splitting the floor. The air grew heavy, filled with fire and shadow. Colliding. The girl shielded her eyes, her voice breaking as she cried, "Human!" The human gripped the crown, his knuckles white. The king's hand wrapped around it too, their strength locked together. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then the human looked up at the chained girl. His voice, though weak, carried across the hall. This ends. Now. He pulled with all his strength, wrenching the crown free. The king screamed, a sound that shook the heavens, as shadows poured from his body like smoke torn by the wind. His massive frame faltered, shrinking, weakening. The crown burned in the human's hands, its dark power searing him. But he did not let go. The girl's chains cracked again. She fell forward, free at last. The human staggered, holding the crown high. The shadows twisted and shrieked, trying to escape. His body trembled, blood dripping, but his eyes were steady. The king collapsed to his knees, his voice broken. You are no man, you are death itself. The human looked down at him, his breath ragged. No, I am only a man who would not bow. With that, he slammed the crown against the throne. It shattered into pieces, the shadows screaming before, vanishing into nothing. The hall shook once more, then fell silent. The girl crawled forward, tears streaming down her face. She reached the human, who dropped the crown's fragments, his body swaying. You freed me, she whispered, her hand brushing his. After 200 years, you freed me. The human smiled faintly, though his body was breaking. And I would do it again. The throne hall lay in ruins. Smoke drifted from the shattered crown, its pieces glowing faintly before turning to dust. The once mighty king knelt on the broken floor, stripped of his shadows, his crownless head lowered in defeat. His voice was no longer thunder, but a whisper. It cannot be. A man should not have undone me. The human stood over him, swaying on his feet. His body was torn and burned, every breath heavy with pain. Blood stained his chest, his arms, his face, but his eyes remained steady. He looked down at the broken king and spoke softly. You ruled with chains and fear. Your time is over. The girl, finally freed from her bonds, stumbled forward. Her ankles bled where the chains had cut into her for centuries, but she did not care. She dropped to her knees beside the human, her hands trembling as they reached for him. "You did it," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "You truly did it." He turned his head toward her, his expression gentler now. "No one should be left alone in chains." His voice was weak, but the words struck deeper than any blade. The king, gasping, lifted his head one last time. His eyes burned with rage even as his power faded. "You think this will save her? You think the galaxy will forgive? She carries a curse of rebellion. She will be hunted as long as she breathes, and you will die before the suns rise." The girl's eyes hardened, her voice steady for the first time in centuries. "No, he gave me back my freedom. And with it, I will carve a new path." She rose to her feet, her form tall despite her wounds. She looked down at the king who had broken her people, and for the first time in her long imprisonment, she felt no fear. Only fire. The king's body slumped, strength leaving him. His crown was gone, his shadows erased. He fell silent, the weight of centuries of cruelty ending in dust. The hall grew quiet. Only the human's ragged breaths broke the silence. He stumbled, falling to one knee. The girl rushed to his side, holding him with all her strength. "Stay with me," she begged. "Please, you cannot fall now." He managed a faint smile. "I've fought worse. I'll live, maybe." His hand brushed hers, rough and scarred. "But at least, you are free." Her tears fell onto his hand, her voice breaking. "Free because of you. You chose me when you could have had treasure, power, anything." "Why?" The human looked at her, his eyes calm even in his pain. "Because gold fades, power rots. But a soul in chains deserves freedom. Even if it takes my last breath." Her heart clenched at his words. She pressed her forehead against his, her voice trembling. "Then live, human. Live not for chains or war, but for me. For us." Outside, the hall shook as the news spread. The king was dead. The shadows were gone. The people who had lived under fear for generations began to gather at the gates, their whispers growing into shouts. Hope spread faster than fire, carried on the wind. The girl stood, helping the human rise. Though he leaned on her, his steps unsteady, they moved together toward the broken gates. When the people saw them, silence fell for a moment. All eyes turned to the girl, their lost princess, freed at last. Then the silence broke into a roar of voices, cries of joy and disbelief. She raised her hand, supporting the human with the other. Her voice rang clear across the crowd. "The chains are broken. The king has fallen. Today we are free." The people shouted her name, their voices echoing through the ruins. The human stood beside her, scarred, bloodied, but unbowed. He did not need a crown or a throne. His presence alone was enough. The girl turned to him, her eyes shining. "You are no king," she said softly. "But to me, you are more than that. You are the one who gave me back my life." The human's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "And you are worth more than all the gold in the galaxy." Together, they stepped out into the light, leaving behind the ruins of the hall and the ashes of a crown. The galaxy would not forget the human who chose freedom over treasure, nor the girl who rose from chains to lead her people. And though scars covered his body, and her past weighed heavy, in that moment, there was only one truth between them: hope. Fierce and unbreakable, the story of the man who refused gold and chose the shackled girl instead had just begun.